The biggest misconception about trauma bonds is that they are simply an emotional attachment or some kind of an addiction to a toxic relationship. They are not, however, just something that occur at the emotional or psychological level. And what makes these bonds so incredibly powerful is truly and in all factuality, one, not a matter of your being weak, foolish, or lacking willpower, or two, because you're addicted to this toxic relationship in terms of you being some kind of glutton for punishment who oddly finds enjoyment from being repeatedly brain-fucked face first into the pavement by Satan. Hell no. But rather, the real reason that these bonds are so incredibly powerful and have such control over your mind is from their being deeply rooted in biology and get developed from this prolonged abuse, physically changing your brain's network, how it functions, and throws your nervous system completely out of whack. And why this is so important is because just having even a basic understanding of the science behind it and the specific elements involved that are necessary for these bonds to form in the first place is truly the key that unlocks the padlock to this psychological prison that gets created from these bonds and allows you to finally be able to detach from the narcissist and get back the life that you deserve, that these creatures, as much as they want to pretend and delusionally believe themselves to be more privileged than any king who's ever lived, had absolutely no right to take from you. So bear with me for the next 10 minutes or so, as this information honestly is one of the most important things for anyone to know about what narcissistic abuse does to you and how to get yourself free from the death grip that trauma bonds put on you. Because the brutal, harsh reality is that these bonds aren't something that time alone is going to release you from its control, any more than the power it has over you becomes lessened simply by ending the relationship. Whether they discarded you or you have finally gotten to that point where you have far surpassed your max capacity of how much one person's BS you are able to handle, and kind of hope deep down that the door does hit them good, hard, and swiftly square in their ass as they're making their way out of it. Either way, you will continue to be trapped in this cycle that you never consented to. And here is the real reason that it happens. So imagine your brain being like some dense forest filled with winding trails, and these trails represent the pathways your brain follows each time you make a decision, process an emotion, respond to a situation, or react to an experience. Just like with a path in the woods, the more it gets walked on, the clearer it becomes, and the easier the path is then to follow. And because our brains prioritize our survival and conserving energy above all else, it defaults to these well-worn paths as they require less energy. So more or less, when we repeatedly think, feel, do, or experience something, the corresponding pathway gets stronger and more defined, making it more automatic or ingrained. And our memories kind of act like trail markers in the woods, reminding us of where these different paths lead, be that of comfort, pleasure, safety, fear, shame, pain, etc. And our autonomic nervous system, or ANS, just as a danger ahead or turn back now sign would forewarn you about a treacherous path, trying to steer us away or to act accordingly depending on whatever threat it gets detected. And because our ANS is wired for survival, it not only is looking out for or trying to detect threats of danger, but it's also looking for ways to enhance our survival. And because our brain likes predictability, familiarity. So when you're around somebody that seems like you, shares common interest, has the same taste in music, and has the same kind of outlook on life, gets determined in our ANS that this person is safe and we can relax, let down our guard, and okay for us to form trust, connections, and bonds with them. And this right here is the first brick to form the foundation in which will eventually become the psychological prison that the narcissist traps you in with their invisible setup. And why you don't see them coming? Because narcissists diligently study you and know way more about you before they even confront you for the first time, combined with their impeccable ability to mirror, mimic, and reflect back to you your same cadence, tone, energy level, gestures, and mannerisms, tricks our ANS into interpreting them as being safe. Once they get the hunch that you feel comfortable around them and that they have gained your trust, they crank up the intensity and hit you with their Hiroshima version of the love bomb, which is like a bulldozer creating an instant neural superhighway in your brain as the bombardment of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin that gets released and is now flooding your system. That to the reward center in your brain is like you just got served the most potently delicious cocktail you have ever had in your life that has such a chemical effect on you that the moment it touches your tongue, you're all like, hot damn, hit me up again, and I'll take another one to go, please. And this over-the-top, almost euphoric high it puts you in not only bulldozes a neural superhighway connecting the narcissist to extreme pleasure, safety, and attachment, but it gives this path a trail marker as if it were something amazing and almost irreplaceable. Kind of like super glue getting stuck between your fingertips becomes an immediate, extremely tight connection to which is also extremely painful to try to separate from, and thus laying down the next brick that will lead to your psychological entrapment. As this first impression that they painted in your head and gave you this illusion of being someone familiar, coupled with the bulldozed down superhighway to pleasure, marked with its flashing neon sign to remind you of how amazing and irreplaceable of a connection this is what your brain now clings to and will continue even when this person that they eluded and duped you into believing they were begins to transform into something more evil, vindictive, and conniving than Satan because of the subtle, insidious way that narcissists strategically go about making this transition. Rather than instantly flipping the switch, going all douchebag are us, full throttle, which would signal your ANS that you might want to turn around and get your ass off of this path, taking down the flashing neon sign and replacing it with danger ahead with big red blinking lights and an obnoxiously loud siren to assure that you avoid this path that will only become a downward death spiral at all cost. Instead, these markers just become blurry and distorted as the cognitive dissonance that gets created from these conflicting images and perceptions that you have of them, and due to these hot and cold treatments coming in at unpredictable increments, makes the dopamine rush that you get when they are laying it on all hot mode more intense because the effects of dopamine are more exacerbated or more effective when they come in inconsistent or unpredictable times. Because of the intensity of this pleasure, it keeps you chasing it, and why people become addicted to these relationships, not because you're a glutton for punishment, but because of the intense pleasure, even if it is just little tidbits here and there. And because of this, rather than these trail markers getting scrambled up or rerouting these pathways with a different label, just make them blurry, making it impossible for you to be able to tell and or trust if these pathways are safe and lead the way to pleasure, or if they are dangerous and lead their way to fear, shame, etc. And that over time, especially after entering into the discard phase, these pathways are now more consistently being reinforced as predominantly those that lead to fear, shame, and guilt, but because it still has this big neon sign flashing amazing, irreplaceable attachment, your brain continues to cling on to this initial illusion coupled with their manipulation, degrading remarks, blame shifting, invalidating your feelings, enhancing your self-doubt. You can't even trust yourself, and at this point have been isolated from your family and friends, so you have no one else to help ground you back to reality, as you feel like you need them for your survival, and why it literally becomes more painful to leave than it does to stay and endure this abuse, because to your brain, leaving them is legitimately the equivalent of starvation. So staying and enduring their heinous treatment, it gets interpreted by your brain as being the better choice in terms of your survival, adding yet another brick to this psychological imprisonment. And even after leaving, again, whether on your own or you've been discarded, your brain still defaults back to this pathway. Anytime you ruminate or try to figure out what went wrong or make sense of things or want to help them or anything to do with the relationship, reinforces this pathway. And it won't stop, because when dealing with a narcissist, there is no way to make sense of it in terms of how we think and behave, as well as you don't get any closure or any kind of valid, reasonable explanation. Not only do you get stuck in this loop, but the cherry on top of this shitty predicament cake is the way that our brain, seeing loss as loss, whether it be the loss of a job, a pet, a loved one, or the end of a relationship. And it can't process or grieve this loss unless the brain truly sees it as such, and why it's honestly harder to get over than even sudden tragic death of a loved one, because our brain still at some point recognizes that there's no possibility for a reconnection, allowing us to move forward through these stages of grief. But with narcissists, every time that we ruminate or go back down that rabbit hole of trying to make sense of something they did, said, signaling back to our brain once again that this person is still accessible and therefore not actually a loss. So it's not going to shift from attachment mode to grief mode. Why this is such a big problem is due to the way that this does become like an addiction, craving this reconnection with the narcissist to get another little tidbit of the dopamine rush, and legitimately will not stop until your brain sees them as no longer being an option. And the only way that you are going to be able to do that, to radically accept it all in its entirety for full face value, they are what they are, that there is nothing that you can do to change it, fix it, or make it any different. You can't, and you won't, nor is it your responsibility to have to. This is truly not your fault. It would have happened to anybody else in your shoes, because narcissist tricks and manipulative tactics aren't aimed to fool you at the conscious level, but rather they hijack your subconscious mind, to which is something that intelligence, confidence, and street smarts aren't going to protect you from seeing it coming. Regardless whether you have the confidence of a peacock or you are more insecure than the cowardly lion and the scarecrow put together, it does not matter. It wouldn't have made a difference, and it is not your fault, because abuse is never your fault. And it's not something you're responsible for or should take ownership in. But you do have to take ownership in the fact that this did happen. It is what it is. And in order to get your life back, you're going to have to take action. You're going to have to make the conscious choice every day to do things that are going to change this trauma pathway that has been ingrained into your mind and has created this psychological prison that you're trapped in. And by being proactive and going and doing things daily and repeatedly doing them, as that is how these neural pathways developed in the first place, it will over time become the more worn path. And the less you go down that rabbit hole and ruminating or thinking or trying to make sense of them, that path, just like the one in the woods, will eventually become overgrown and non-existent. And the easiest way to go about this is by doing things that are going to require activation of your prefrontal cortex, which in turn will quiet down your amygdala or your fear center that has become overactive due to this trauma pathway always heading in that direction, and shift the brain out of this survival mode. And stimulating the vagus nerve, which is the safety or baseline phase of your ANS, as well as learning something new or creativity, stimulates neuroplasticity to form or strengthen new neural pathways. It can range from things from woodwork, painting, knitting, sewing, cooking, fixing a car, doing home repairs, gardening, even doing jigsaw or crossword puzzles, because require problem solving, planning, and decision making enhances your sense of worth, your confidence, as well as your ability to once again be able to trust yourself. And this sense of achievement triggers the release of dopamine, which not only enhances your mood and motivation, but it signals the brain that you're able to get this hit that you keep looking for the narcissist to get up until you're able to start releasing or triggering the release of dopamine on your own. They have been the sole source of how you get this pleasure hormone. By default is going to eliminate some of this pain, and providing a mental break, the better you're overall going to feel, because it allows you to finally get back into that vagus vagal state that you haven't been able to be in so long, where your body is then again able to rest, relax, and restore. Writing down the things that you've accomplished, as well as the triggers and things that you do to try to calm yourself down or get through them, as just the act of writing triggers the prefrontal cortex. Default quiets down your fear center or the amygdala, as well as can help you organize these chaotic thoughts, giving you a sense of control, which in turn help counter this sense of helplessness and powerlessness, which in and of itself can be huge, because there needs to be a power imbalance in order for trauma bonds to form in the first place. It creates this environment where one feels trapped, dependent, and like there's no escapes, and it's honestly the glue that keeps these trauma bonds together. And once you are able to regain that power, get back a sense of control and autonomy and independence of your own life, this trauma bond and these neural pathways will begin to fizzle and eventually become something truly of your past, and to break down the walls of this mental prison, because you truly are worth and deserve so much more. Ain't nobody worth losing your life, soul, or sanity to. Choose you, save you, focus on you. Fuck the narcissist.